Welcome, Cyclone fans, to the latest edition of the Nightcap. I am your host, Aiden Wyatt, joined by Levi Stevenson and a special guest from Blue Wings Rising, from Enemy's Territory, Andy Mitz. How's it going, guys?
Going pretty good.
Have to imagine is when Kansas is whole ass playing with house money at this point.
Hey, they still have work to do. They have to get to a bowl game. And I mean, I don't know. If you look at the SI people, according to them, Kansas is going to be playing Alabama in the Sugar Bowl. So,
Really?
yeah, I saw that bowl projection. I'm like, what is he spending? How can I get some? Because that sounds amazing.
I too do hard drugs.
Commit tax fraud.
Tax fraud.
Anyways. All right. What are we talking about today? Fuck me. Oh my God.
You good?
I don't know. I'll figure it out. Go ahead. Start the show. Fuck me.
All right. Well, obviously, maybe we'll just forget last week's game. Not even going to talk about it.
I have pent up rage.
And we're going to preview the Kansas game. Yeah. All right. Well, let's exercise some demons then.
Like push-ups and stuff? Exercise demons?
Wow.
Anyways, okay. So
No, we're not doing anything with Wake Forest. Come on.
those are the demon weekends. Anyways. Last week was fucking dumb. That was an extremely frustrating game to watch from start to finish. Not to least, well, one, it started off terrible because of fucking penalties. Just an absolutely mind-boggling targeting penalty on Bo Freyler, which was mirrored at least two other times by Baylor on the defensive end, who did not get targeting penalties. And not only that, but was immediately followed up with an unnecessary roughness because Colby Reeder had the absolute audacity to get in the way of a receiver on his crossing route. Right to jail. And Baylor got a free 30 yards out of that. And then a little later in the game, Anthony Johnson was the victim of maybe the second or third dumbest penalty I've ever seen in a football game.
What's the first?
I think the first is still Xavier's taunting penalty. I think
fair.
it'll be extremely difficult to top Xavier's taunting penalty as far as just absolute nonsense. The second one was a not penalty, which was the picked up pass interference. Well, one of them, the most egregious one against Kansas State, which is that one where the guy's clearly just hugging Alan Lazard at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever. That's the second worst. This one's the third worst. And I'd say maybe it actually could be second because I didn't know that it was possible for a defensive player to be called for a block below the waist. I didn't know that was a thing. Apparently nobody knew that was a thing.
Well, no, I mean, not nobody, but it's a bad named penalty because it's not
exactly.
Like they don't have another. Like they just need to create a new name for it and a new sign. But essentially, they wanted to be able to protect offensive linemen from getting their legs taken out by defenders who would just, dive at their legs and cause a bunch of injuries. And so, I understand why they have that penalty, but the naming of it is absolutely terrible because it's not describing what's actually happening.
Not to mention that first contact was made by Anthony Johnson.
Yeah, it was like on the
shoulder. He hit his shoulder first, and then the guy was leaned over enough that it hit his shoulder first and then hit his waist. Like, it wasn't below the waist, it was at the waist, and his shoulder was the first place it hit. Fucking crazy. I personally do not believe that officiating crew should be allowed to officiate another important game. Send them to the fucking MEAC or something like that. I don't give a shit. Like they should be.
Here's a question for you, Levi.
Ivy League games from now on.
Send her the West Virginia Texas game this week. That game's not important.
Same. Yeah, that one is of similar consequence to Harvard Dartmouth. Anyways,
question for you, Levi. Do you think that Iowa State deserved to win outside of the officiating?
No, because the defense was generally fine. They didn't. They didn't give up any real long plays or anything. I mean, aside from the one busted ass coverage on that flea flicker, for the most part,
That was
kept the
bad.
top on the defense.
That was real bad.
That was a horrible. I firmly believe that if Bo Fraley was on the field, that would have not happened. But the linebackers missed a lot. They missed a lot of terrible, terrible pursuit angles. They missed opportunities to stop the run, all sorts of stuff. But the most egregious offender of the day was Tom Manning's offense, because they threw a 25-yard deep post to a wide-open Dimitri Stanley in the end zone and decided, you know what? We're good. We don't need to throw the ball deep anymore. We don't need to push the ball downfield. Despite the 2 times they did that, which was in the end of the first half, in the middle of the fourth quarter, when they were already down 17 points, those were the 2 times they felt the urgency to throw the ball downfield. And it worked both times, extremely efficiently. Wide open. It was very clear that Baylor's secondary was not capable of defending the deep ball. But Tom Manning insisted on running this dink and dunk methodical offense, despite the fact that it wasn't working. That offense is built for Brock Purdy and Charlie Kohler and Breece Hall. That offense isn't built for Hunter Deckers and Xavier Hutchinson and Dimitri Stanley and Jarrell Brock and Easton Dean. They still are running last year's offense with completely different personnel. And it's so frustrating, it's crazy, because there's so much talent. Hunter Deckers is an objectively talented dude. And there's a ton of talent at the receiver spot. But they have absolutely refused to adjust the offense up to this point to suit the personnel. And it's garbage. I'm just sorry. I realized that Tom Manning wasn't nominated for the Broyles Award a couple years ago for the best assistant in college football or whatever. Even if he actually was one of the best assistants in college football in 19 and 20, he has been a disaster the last 2 seasons. And I know that yards per play and stuff like that, Iowa State has been pretty good. I get it. But if you're looking at situational play calling and just the overall thing, it feels like Iowa State should be a lot better on offense. There's so little flow to this year's team. It feels like they're always playing not to lose, and they're always playing scared, and the play calling has been super conservative, and it's frustrating as hell because you have a bunch of young, really athletic dudes that are here to go catch deep balls, and they're not throwing them. I love Jarrell Brock. He's a good, solid running back, but that's what he is. He's a good, solid running back. He ain't Breece Hall. He's not David Montgomery. He doesn't He's just not and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. He's an excellent pass blocker. He does a lot of things really well. But is he a dude that you're going to give him the ball 30 times in a game like you did Breece Hall and just be pound away and let him go? No. And you need to recognize that. You need to recognize that you don't have the personnel to just try to methodically march down the field every single time like you did with Breece Hall. Or sometimes you didn't have to because Breece would just bust off a 70-yard run because he got bored, I guess. I don't know. You don't have that in this offense. But you do have a quarterback with a humongous arm and a bunch of dudes with a ton of long speed that can catch 9 routes and shit. And you've got you have maybe the best route runner in college football in Xavier Hutchinson. He's getting lots of targets, but they're all 5-10 yards down the field at the most. They're not throwing it to him down the field, even though he's plenty good enough to do so. I don't know. Maybe I'm taking crazy pills here, but it feels like the parachute right now is Tom Manning. Feels like he's holding us back. I'm not there in practice every day, but all I can see is what we've got on the field. I can see what's working and what's not. And what I know is working is aggressive approach where they're playing with tempo and they're pushing the ball down the field 10, 15, 20 yards consistently. And what's not working is trying to dink and dunk our way down the field. It's not working. And it's really frustrating because Iowa State should be better than they are right now.
Yeah, what to say.
Andy, do you know a thing or two about offense?
A thing or two, yeah. I've been watching a really good one this year, so
Kansas is putting up points, man. Yeah.
Well, and really, the way Kansas is putting up points is doing exactly the sort of thing that Levi's talking about Tom Manning needing to do. Andy Kotelnicki has shown that he is one of the elite offensive coordinators in terms of adjusting to things in game and finding ways to utilize the talent that he has available. And I think that's really where the big, the big difference is for this Kansas team is they have guys that they can, they have guys that they can use, but they're using them effectively. They're finding ways to actually play into those strengths, which is something that Kansas has not done in a really long time. I mean, I'm just imagining or thinking about all the times where we, recruited speedy running backs and then decided to hammer them up the middle right into, it's like smack into the offensive line. That doesn't work. It doesn't really take advantage of the guys that you've got and why you got them.
Puka's a perfect example.
Oh yeah, Puka's a perfect. Les Miles ruined Puka with the requirement that he had to go run straight up the gut, 10 times a game. It was the stupidest thing ever.
And that's the biggest sin of all of this is that they just have not adjusted the offense to fit the current personnel. They just haven't, and I don't know why. Like I understand that Matt Campbell wants to play the possession game. I get it, I do. But if you have an offense that can run and at a high cruising speed and keep the ball moving down the field, yeah, there might be more possessions in the game, and yeah, the defense might be on the field a little bit more than they are normally. But you know what? Offense is going to score more points. And you know what you got to do to win the game, Aiden? Score more points.
Football's easy. Score more points.
Just score more points than the other guy.
Bullshit.
And right now, Iowa State ain't scoring more points. That's the problem. And it's really frustrating. All I know is that in 2018, in Tom Manning's year in the NFL, Iowa State ran probably the most explosive offense of the Matt Campbell era. Helps when you have Hakeem Butler. But they also had a true freshman quarterback that wasn't afraid to throw the ball downfield. And that they did. Threw the ball downfield a lot. Just saying. You have a quarterback that likes to throw the ball downfield. He's pretty good at it. Got the guys to do it. We should try it sometime. Maybe score some points. That'd be good.
Or try it more times.
Yeah, they do try. Yeah, try more times. Yeah, they have tried it. And then they just said, nah, we're good. These 30-yard passes, they're too quick for us. Too much fun. They're too loud. And they just don't run them again, I guess. I'm not sure why, but here we are. Wildly frustrating. Especially because they're kind of wasting good performances by Xavier Hutchinson and all that. Where he's and Jalen Noel to it, Jalen Noel as well. They're wasting really good performances by those guys because the rest of the offense doesn't do anything.
I gotta say, this is not how I expected this episode of the Nightcap to go. Because,
you should have seen our Slack chat after the game last Saturday. If Matthias was here, he'd be going like.
Well, yeah. I thought Matthias was going to be here to go.
He'd be loud and cussing right now.
Yeah, but it was funny because I was like, yeah, Iowa State should beat Baylor, and then we're going to have two undefeated teams, and I'm going to come on the Nightcap, and we're going to trash talk back and forth, and it's going to be a fun atmosphere where we're both super confident in our teams, and now it's kind of depressing. Levi, come on.
Just pissed off at Tom Manning. That's all I am right now. Just pissed off at Tom Manning.
So really, what you're saying is that Tom Manning ruined the Nightcap tonight.
I don't know about ruined, but he changed it.
He brought the energy down on the Nightcap tonight.
He changed the Nightcap, that's for sure. Guess overall quality, I suppose, is depending on what you came here looking for. But
well, that's a good point.
But I don't know if anybody watched that game on Saturday and thought that I was going to be like, that's all right. We'll just move on, go to the next game. I guess they probably haven't watched the show before, I guess, or they haven't listened to me, But all I know is that right now, Iowa State feels like a team that is on a really, they're not really, I was going to say an unstable equilibrium, but I wouldn't even say that, where it feels like they're just there. They can be really good, and they just choose not to, maybe not choose not to, but it's more just like they elect not to. They forego the opportunity. And it's profoundly frustrating, especially when ordinarily it comes in the form of dumb special teams plays, the margins losses that we, because Matt Campbell always talks about the margins, but then we always talk about they never have the margins covered. So I don't know what the hell that is. or whatever. But it's special teams plays, or it's little fumbles, or it's penalties, or whatever it is, or it's the offensive line. It usually comes in the form of those silly things that like they feel like anomalies, where it's like 2 block punts in a game is not it's pretty wild, but it's not going to be that big a deal or something like that. It's kind of an anomaly. You can write that off. But when you have an offense that's just sputtering and just can't seem to get anything going in a positive direction, that feels a lot more existential than it does for special teams and turnovers and stuff like that. Like, just turnovers can be fixed, and part of turnovers is luck too. Like that first interception out of halftime where Xavier had basically had it in his hands. It came down, bounced into the guy, and then bounced into the other guy for an interception. That's just dumb fucking luck. There is nothing. Hunter did nothing wrong. Xavier didn't do anything wrong. Just dumb luck that Baylor lucked into that interception. I would die on my grave that Baylor is the most unjustly lucky program of all time. But that
honestly, I thought it was ridiculous. Some of the Baylor fans that I know, and knowing them, I understand. Like, I would fully prepare for them to do it. But talking about how they went in and won, and it should have been a double-digit win, and look at how much Baylor dominated that game. It's like, no, Baylor didn't really dominate that game.
Baylor didn't dominate that game.
Iowa State couldn't get out of their own way on offense, and the refs handed Baylor a huge advantage at the beginning.
And then you had dumb luck on that turnover and stuff like that. So it's just, there's a lot of things that worked against Iowa State on Saturday, and one of the biggest ones was themselves. And I do not understand why they can't just get out of their own way a lot of times. Like Aiden, if I were to ask you, what's the identity of this football team? What would you say? So for example, the last 2 years, I would say the identity of Iowa State football was, we're going to run it with Breece Hall, use him. We're going to use him as kind of a workhorse back and to get some explosive plays off it. And we're going to let Brock Purdy and Charlie Kohler and Xavier Hutchinson kind of move the passing game along to do enough to keep the running game moving. And that's what the offense is going to be. What would you say is the identity of this Cyclones team?
Of the offense or the whole team?
Yes, both.
Well, I think the identity of the offense is dink and dunk right now, which
feels
is not
insane,
what it should
right?
be.
That
yeah,
feels insane.
I mean, we're seeing a lot of crossing routes, quick routes, that kind of stuff, which is gonna get us, 3-4 yards. Yeah, but what's gonna be the difference maker in games is us getting big plays versus the team we're playing getting big plays, and we're not getting big plays right now.
We're not even trying them. We
Yeah,
tried once.
it feels like, watching it from the outside, it feels like Iowa State is a team that, for an offensive drive to be derailed, you just got to get one stop. Like one
If you
play.
put them in second and long, right now, if you put Iowa State in second and long, you're probably feeling pretty good about your chances to get them off the field. And that's really discouraging because, like I said, you got the personnel, but that's not like Iowa State has generally been pretty good on third down on offense for the most part. It helps you had Charlie Kohler and Breece Hall and all these guys or whatever, but like the offense's lack of ability to overcome adversity on a drive-to-drive basis is maddening. Like, they can, in theory, over a game, if we saw it against Iowa on that 99-yard drive. If they get on a roll and they're going and they can stay in their rhythm, they're great. If one little tiny bit of adversity shows up, the thing just falls apart. Like, and part of it, I will say part of it, just watching a lot of film and stuff like that, part of it is that at times Hunter gets a little bit reliant on his check down. That happens with young quarterbacks. It does. I mean, that's just kind of a thing that they do. And that's okay. He's got to grow into that. But he's missing some really obvious reads, like in the middle of the field, where he'll take a check down, but a tight end is 6 yards downfield wide open with a possibility to get to 10 or 12 or something like that. And the running back might get 4 or whatever. Like, he'll do that. But then there's other times where he'll throw directly over Jalen Knowles' head to try to hit Xavier Hutchinson through try to thread the needle. And so which to me suggests some sort of internal conflict there. Like, maybe, like, I don't know, because we're not in practices, so we don't know what the coaches are telling them and stuff like that. But it feels like, to me, like they're telling him like, well, we need to move the ball downfield, but not too far, like, but not too much. You know, we need to protect the football. We need to not turn it over and all this, or whatever. And Hunter's trying to push the ball downfield, and he's being told not to. And then other times he's trying to listen to what they say and check down and stuff like that. But then he's saying, well, why didn't you take this guy down further downfield? He plays like he's constantly running through decisions in his brain. Like he's actively processing decisions in his brain rather than just running through kind of the flow of the game and letting it all kind of happen subconsciously. However, he plays like he's actively debating these things in his head while he plays. And we saw that a little bit out of Brock Purdy, like his junior year, when it kind of seemed like the coaching staff was like over-coaching him. I don't know if that's what's happening, but he's kind of playing like it. He's playing similar to the way I remember Brock Purdy playing like his junior year, when it seemed like they were just telling him too many different things and there was too many cooks in the kitchen on this type of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's vaguely reminiscent of TCU back when they had two offensive coordinators that were battling, and two other people in the room that were trying to tell them what to do.
Right.
You saw a lot of like confusion on individual plays. You saw a lot of second guessing, and I think that's Kansas fans are very familiar, right, with an offense that doesn't know what it wants to do. And that's what this feels like for Iowa State right now, is that they don't really know what they want to do. And I don't know that looking from the outside, have confidence that Manning is all of a sudden going to figure it out, how to call the game correctly to utilize what Iowa State's doing, which I think is why a lot of Kansas fans have optimism about this weekend, because the thought process here is that, Kansas offense is going to be able to, it's not going to be as productive as it has been, but it's still going to be fairly productive. And Iowa State seems to be so far up in their head right now offensively that the defense, which is a very opportunistic defense, it doesn't grade out very well on metrics, but they have come up with big plays in big spots that they're going to be able to do what they need to do to, create some of that turnover luck or create what they need to get those stops, especially if it only takes one negative play to derail an entire drive.
And that's kind of what it feels like, is that they kind of play quote unquote scared. A lot is that they're just sometimes they're just so afraid of committing a turnover that they'll just willingly, not take any risk whatsoever, which is kind of what you need to do to be able to have an explosive offense. Is you need to introduce some risk reward into the scenario. And in the offensive plays, like they're just so risk averse that they will like intentionally pull their own parachute basically and kind of handicap themselves a little bit so that they don't turn it over. I understand not wanting to commit turnovers, but you also need to take advantage of what the defense is giving you and take full advantage of it. Not take advantage of, well, the running back's open in the flat, so let's throw it to him every time or whatever. Like, I'm talking, if you see Jalen Noel downfield, 10 yards downfield, and he's wide open, throw it to him. Or if you see Easton Dean coming across the middle and he's 6 yards downfield and has a chance to go in for a touchdown, you throw it to him. Don't check it down to the running back. Like, is that maybe technically a safer option? Yes, but it's low floor, low ceiling, or it's like medium floor, low ceiling versus medium floor, high ceiling, and it's like, I don't know. I guess, like I said, I'm not in practice every week, so I don't see. Maybe like the offense in practice, they try to throw it downfield and it's absolute dog shit. I don't know, but what I know is I see it in games, and it looks pretty effective, and by not trying to stretch the defense, they're allowing them to stack the box, which makes it harder to run the ball, which makes it harder to pass the ball. And it just feels like they don't help themselves. They don't let the passing game help the running game and vice versa. They just play right into the same part of the field all the time. And they use the same pre-snap motions every time. And most people, if you've watched lots of Iowa State film, you've watched lots of Iowa State games, a lot of people can watch and see how they're lined up in a formation and see what pre-snap motion they're doing and be able to fairly accurately predict one of a couple things that are going to happen. I mean, the offense isn't super creative or anything like that, which is pretty disappointing because, it's almost like he's trying to model the program after, Bill Snyder's Kansas State teams and even Kirk Ferentz's Iowa teams and stuff like that. Both known for having really good defense, really good special teams, and kind of whatever offenses, ranging from horrendous to not bad. Like in the case of Kansas State, where they've had some good offenses, but neither of those are like offensive powerhouses or anything like that. Neither of them run creative schemes, especially not Iowa. But you can still be fundamentally sound on defense and have good special teams and run a creative offense. You can have both of those things. You can have your cake and eat it too in this situation. You can play defense and special teams like Iowa and like Kansas State and still have a fun offense and one that pushes the ball down the field and tries to be explosive. You can do that. It's like if you can get 4 more 50-yard touchdown passes this season by throwing vertical more often, and it results in those attempts also result in 2 more picks, congratulations, you're +2. 4 more long touchdown passes is still better than 3 picks thrown. It just is. Like, that's the math works out. And you have to take that risk.
Yeah, I think the only way to argue it would be if you were sure that you could go down and methodically get all the way down and score, then theoretically, but again, that's playing scared. That's playing we don't think that we can consistently get those long passes, so we're trying to limit the number of times.
You can do that when you have Breece Hall, who's a one-man offense. Where you can throw it to him. He can just sit there and just chug a lug right into the line for 3 or 4 yards, or he can bust off a 70-yard run. Like, he can do everything. So just being conservative and just running the ball is a lot more of a viable offense when you have a guy like Breece Hall that can do all that. And he can do everything. Jarrell Brock he's good. He's just not Breece Hall. So you can't run an offense through him like he's Breece Hall, because he's just not.
And not many people are.
And very, very few people are. So it's like, I'm not sure why we're trying to force that. I don't know.
You ready to shift gears?
Let's shift gears.
All right. What are the vibes in Lawrence, Kansas right now?
So in the words of Remy Martin, the vibes are immaculate. It is absolutely fantastic right now to be a Kansas fan. Especially coming off of a basketball national championship and then to have a football team that actually is worth something. It's really hard. It's really hard right now to find a fan that has any kind of bad things to say about this program. I mean, the defensive numbers and the ratings for the defense aren't necessarily that great, but it's fun to watch good offensive teams, and it's a lot of fun to talk about what Jalen Daniels is doing for the Jayhawks. So it's a blast right now to be covering this team.
I think, honestly, it would be crazy to say that we didn't see this coming, because I think, most people thought that Lance Leipold was a very, very good coach. And, Iowa State fans see a lot of Matt Campbell in him. So, and Matt Campbell has said it himself, and I think even Coach Leipold said this week that they're trying to resemble their program off a program like Iowa State. So,
yeah, he did.
It's crazy to say, but it's hard to not root for you guys this year when you're not playing Iowa State.
Yeah, it's one of those things. The message of consistency has been very similar. In terms of what Lance Leipold does compared to what Matt Campbell has done at Iowa State, and I think it can come back and bite you if you're not making adjustments that you need to make in the name of being consistent. But the fact that Iowa State has been able to keep the same, assistants at a lot of different positions and keep a lot of that coaching consistency has been super helpful in building the identity of the program and how they want to do it. And that's what Kansas, is working to try to do. Leipold, when he first came in, he kept a good 50% of the coaches that were still here at that point. Because they had that familiarity with the players, they could help them to figure out which players need to slot in where. And it's not like they were doing a bad job. Like Kansas, the Kansas assistants were actually doing a fantastic job. They just unfortunately had a head coach who couldn't get out of his offensive coordinator way. And so it was one, I forgot the coach's name, Emmett, who was the wide receiver coach. He went down to Texas Tech, or back to Texas Tech. But, he was the interim head coach after Les Miles got let go. And he ran the program. They had a really good spring practice. They had a lot of really good things they were doing. Unfortunately, it wasn't Leipold's system, so it still made it difficult in that first year. But we saw the strides last year, and it was really just a matter of making sure that they didn't lose a ton of players to the transfer portal this year. I think they lost a total of 3 players that had any kind of contributions this year, and then they brought in a whole bunch of talented players from all over the place that felt like they didn't get the opportunity that they should have gotten at their prior location, or we're just looking for an opportunity to be able to break out and do something a little bit differently than what they did. And so they got guys that have been successful, and they got guys who were on the same level as the stars that they had here, because that's what Kansas' problem has always been, is that they typically have a set of starters who are pretty good, are probably Big 12 caliber players, wouldn't make it to any all Big 12 teams with the exception of maybe 1 or 2 players. Like Kyron Johnson's the guy that comes to mind, or like a Dorrance Armstrong or things like that. Like they've had consistently a single player on each side of the ball that has been good enough to, be considered to be a really good Big 12 player. And the rest of the starting lineup is, your average Big 12 players that normally is making up the majority of your roster. And then everybody else is just like, yeah, you're there. Have fun. And so when you can't play those, starters the entire game, the drop off is so big that it doesn't really matter how good those starters play. Backups weren't cutting it. And so Kansas, now they are at a point where your starters and the backups, and in some cases even the third, person on the depth chart, they're all at a comparable level. So even if they're not the most talented at a particular position group, they are extremely consistent across it, no matter who is out there, and they're able to do a lot of the same things. So you don't see a lot of variance in the way that they play things. You don't see a lot of variance in the capabilities that they have to stop something. If they can stop something in the first quarter, they can probably stop it in the fourth quarter, because they have similar guys who are playing, without being exhausted, because they haven't been playing the entire game. They've been, spreading it out over the course of a huge number of people. So it'll be interesting, I think, to see how long that keeps up when we get to the point where like the upper level, and these top level guys, are they going to be able to make big enough differences when Kansas, so that when Kansas gets to the end of the game and has fresher guys, that Kansas can't make that comeback. Kansas has been a very good second half team, mainly because they completely worn out the opponent. And we've seen it a lot on the offensive lines. West Virginia has a pretty good offensive line. It's not phenomenal, but it's a solid offensive line. Same with Houston, and honestly, same with Duke. And each of those lines wore down as the game went on, because Kansas was bringing that same pressure the entire game long. So it'll be interesting to see if something similar is going to happen against Iowa State. If it does, I think I will feel a lot better about it being a consistent thing throughout the entire year. But I think this is I think the big test for Kansas. If they're super competitive in this game, whether they win or they lose by a field goal or a touchdown, I think all of that bodes well for them to be competitive in pretty much every game they have the rest of the year.
So one thing that I do want to circle back to is you were talking about coaching consistency. And obviously there's been some rumors of linking Leipold to Nebraska. And, Iowa State fans, we're used to it. Because Matt Campbell has been linked to every single job since he stepped onto campus.
I think he's got like 18 or 19 jobs up to this point. So
yeah,
honestly,
I heard that he was in at Georgia Tech earlier this week interviewing.
Was he? No,
So,
look at
right,
good
yeah,
for him, honestly.
yeah.
At this point, if he's already got like 18 or 19 different jobs right now, so he might as well just keep going. And credit to him, even if his offensive coordinator here is not doing his job, Matt Campbell's got a lot of stuff going on and he's managing it all fairly well. So
I was
honestly,
going to say, he will
good for
get
him.
He will get that 10-win season that everybody says he won't ever be able to get if he has every job in the
the 10-win fucking season, man.
Anyway,
I just think it's ridiculous that that's the big knock on him is he hasn't won 10 wins.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Yeah, he won, except for he won 9 in a season where they just didn't get 2 or 3 off,
Yeah, exactly.
non-conference games where they're free wins.
Yep.
Okay. Name a more iconic duo than Kansas State ignoring their 2020 ass kicking because COVID happened.
So I feel like I've deflected the question successfully.
Yeah.
But no.
Right.
Lance Leipold being linked to a bunch of different jobs. I actually found it kind of funny because he was linked to the Nebraska one. I thought he was going to get linked to the Georgia Tech, but not many people have really talked about that. And not many people have really talked about Arizona State.
What's the draw? What's the draw to Georgia Tech though? It's
honestly, I'm not really sure.
I mean,
it's
you're just in Atlanta.
They're buried in that conference, way down below about a half dozen teams at minimum. Atlanta's not a college sports town.
No.
No, not at all.
Like, I mean, there's no draw to Georgia Tech. There's just not. I'm sorry.
No. I mean, it's one of those things. I have a hard time thinking why you would want. I mean, I'm why a coach who would like that wouldn't be a destination. That might be a stepping stone for a lower level coach that wants to get a Power 5 job and try to show something, but it's definitely not something that you would want to go to as a guy who is an up and comer. And honestly, like Lance Leipold is, he could be a name that would be in for like Auburn if it opens up. Like I don't know that they would actually go with him, and I don't know he would be interested, because I think that's the one thing that gives me a little bit of I guess comfort as a Kansas fan, is that Lance Leipold has shown that he values the ability to do his job and to have that consistency and build the program at the pace that he needs to build it. And that there's a foundation that has to be built in order to be able to get the kind of success with his type of program. I don't think Nebraska would have that kind of patience. I don't think Arizona State would have that kind of patience. And I can't imagine he'd want to go down to Georgia Tech, and try to build the program down there. So
I'm going to push back on Arizona State from this a little bit. Arizona State, in my opinion, is like one of the most underachieving programs in the country as far as what the resources they have available and the success they actually have.
Right.
Because Phoenix is growing as a college football, as a recruiting ground. Arizona is actually kicking out quite a few good players now. But Southern California is right there. Texas isn't that far away. Arizona State's got money. They've got weather. They are Arizona State, so they've got their own reputation as far as things to do. I
just think it's one of those
It feels like Arizona State should be really good at stuff. It should be like cake to recruit.
Yeah, it feels like it should be, but it's also kind of one of those things, if you're talking about a school, who has been severely underperforming, there's really not much difference between trying to build a program at Kansas and trying to build a program at Arizona State, other than the location. But what we found, and what Lance Leipold has talked about, is that his calling card is finding guys that aren't the huge big names, and recruiting all the 5 stars or recruiting all of the best people out of each state and finding those hidden gems and developing them. And that's, I think, really where he shines, is that consistency, developing guys within the system and getting them to a point where they can perform higher than what the expectations were for them.
Yeah, that's what Matt Campbell's built his entire career on too. So it's more just like, if you have a competent coach that knows how to identify talent and how to develop it, Arizona State should be a place that is very good at sports.
I think the question is, can they offer enough, right, to take him from the known situation at Kansas where he's already started?
Oh, I'm not saying they can take him from Kansas, but I'm saying Arizona State should be good. I don't know why they're not, but they're just not. I don't know. I guess I'm not sure what the stress level should be for Kansas fans. I honestly have no idea.
It's funny because
here's my thing, if I can.
Yeah, go ahead.
So
I guess Aiden, go ahead.
Yeah. Iowa State fans, we're pretty numb to it at this point of Matt Campbell being linked to X job.
Yeah,
but
he leaves, but we're not going to stress out about it at this point.
I think Leipold is only in year 2, obviously, so you don't really know as much as we know about Campbell at this point. But honestly, I think it's a situation very similar to Campbell, and we're seeing a lot more in college football right now, where coaches are staying at the school that they want to build and they want to be there forever.
Because the grass ain't
and they don't want to
greener.
take these top 5 jobs or whatever.
Yeah,
so as a Kansas fan, what are your thoughts on that?
Texas isn't a top 5 job.
Well, it's one of those things too. Like, you think about a coach who preaches consistency, and that's what's super important to him. How likely are you to be able to build a consistent program in Nebraska and be there for 10 years? I don't think you're very likely to be able to do that, because they fired Frank Solich after he won 10 games.
Bo Pelini won 9 and got fired.
Yeah, Bo Pelini won 9 and got fired because, as I believe someone put it, he cussed too much in his press conferences.
He didn't get along with the boosters. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's one of those things where, he's absolutely loved here. He can pretty much do whatever he wants at this point, and they really like the area. Like they talk about how much they love Lawrence and the surrounding area and everything, and this feels like home to them. So even though his, he spent time up in Nebraska in that area. His wife, I believe, is from Nebraska as well. I believe that she's from Omaha. I might be off on exactly where it is, but like that is a place that, they might have called home, but I just don't know that the potential of going up there and it not going well, or not going as well as ridiculous Nebraska boosters want it to, if that gives him the kind of security and the kind of consistency that he wants, because that's kind of the thing that he has done. Like his big thing is, as he's moved from one job to another, and he's talked about this several times, he moved on from Wisconsin Whitewater because there wasn't a challenge anymore in what he was doing. It was time for him to find a new challenge and find a new thing. He left them in a really good situation and moved on to Buffalo.
That's a flex if I ever heard one.
Well, but the funny thing too was, like, I forget where it was, but there was a story that I was reading about, like, at Buffalo, it was a similar sort of situation. Like, they got Buffalo, got to the MAC championship a few times, and it was like, you feel, or she made a comment to him from what I was reading about, it doesn't feel like this is as much of a engaging challenge as it was before. And Bo had improved a lot. Right. Yeah. And so, like, it was more of a, you feel like you're ready for a new challenge. And of course he was interested in the Kansas job, when Les Miles got hired. But Jeff Long was intent on getting Les Miles for, whatever reason. And so they didn't really even, my understanding is they didn't even really seriously vet anyone else. They on Les Miles, really give anyone else an option. And that was part of what the problem was last time, was that a lot of people that could have potentially taken the job were off put by the fact that they weren't given a serious opportunity at it. But the change in athletic director, Travis Goff, he's run it completely differently. And there's a synergy there between Goff and Leipold, and Goff and Bill Self, and, and the rest of the athletic department that I haven't seen in a really long time. Honestly, I don't know that I've ever seen it, because Lou Perkins always at ahead with Mark Mangino. I think Al Bowl before Lou Perkins was probably the only guy that really got along with all the coaches that they had. But, he had to fire the guys that didn't perform well, and that's just kind of the way it normally goes. But it's been a long time since we've had an athletic director that I think meshed well with all of the programs and all of the coaches we have at the different programs. So it's a great place to be as a Kansas fan right now, as they are trying to get stuff shored up to protect themselves in whenever the next round of realignment comes along, whatever we can do to make Kansas as strong as possible, so that they can either help to bring more people to the Big 12 and shore up the Big 12, or if Kansas, for whatever reason, has to find a new home somewhere, that they're in as strong a position as possible. So, I think everything is going pretty well. Leipold has an opportunity here to really cement his legacy, not only at Kansas, but in what he's done in the college football world, because, I knew he could get Kansas turned around. I definitely did not think it was going to be this fast. Like, I was expecting, I thought I was making a super bold prediction that they were going to go 6-6 and make a bowl game. And the way that it's looking right now, unless the defense is complete trash, which it doesn't appear that it is, but there's always the possibility, they could be bowl eligible, by the time they face Texas. Like, and that's a real possibility, because I could see them upsetting an Oklahoma or a Baylor or an Oklahoma State at home and getting where they need to get at that point. So, like, this is a team that has that kind of ceiling, and the way that they're approaching it, they say all the right things in the press conferences. You obviously can't win games in press conferences, but they're not saying absolutely anything different at all from last year, where everything was going, I was there at that complete drubbing that we got up in Ames. And the things that he was saying after that game are exactly the same things he's been saying all year. And, to have that kind of message, to say that's what your message is going to be, and then that is still the message, is something you don't see very often. We are used to Kansas coaches panicking and completely abandoning the plan that they are supposed to be using to rebuild a program because they're afraid they're going to get fired. Leipold didn't do that when things went horribly wrong in the first year, and you saw how things turned around as quickly as they did. So Leipold, he could go, and if he goes, that means that Kansas is probably in a lot better position than it was before, and they actually have a legitimate shot of landing a coach that can continue what Leipold's done. I'm actually probably more afraid of Andy Kotelnicki getting poached to go take a job somewhere than Leipold leaving.
Wish we had that problem.
Yeah, well,
you guys
we do have that problem, but it's not for our offensive coordinator. It's for the receivers and running backs coach.
Oh, I would say you guys would probably pay someone to take Manning off your hands right now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Shieldhouse is the one that we're all nervous about losing. But the one thing I think that a lot of people miss with the coaching search stuff is that being at a MAC school and being at a Power 5 school are two totally different things. Like at Buffalo, the ceiling is going to the MAC championship. You might win it and go to a decent bowl game, but you're not going to go to. You're never going to be in a G in like a. You're never going to be in a New Year's Six game. You're never going to be in a playoff or any of that. Like that's just not going to happen. There is a ceiling to what can happen at Buffalo. And
Right.
While
you go
Kansas
undefeated
has
at Buffalo, you might get to go to the Sugar Bowl one
Right.
year, but that's
Oh yeah, maybe. But like at Kansas, while it's more difficult to recruit to than fucking Georgia and Alabama, but like it's still a Power 5. You're still playing for you're still functionally playing for the same championship as the Blue Bloods are. It's maybe a little bit harder to get there, but you're still playing for the same championship, and that's why like once you're playing for the right championship and you're playing for the right title, which is the title, which is what Kansas and Iowa State are both playing for, even if we're just a little bit further away than the Blue Bloods. Once you're playing for that, then what you have available to you is, and like what your situation is, means a lot more than just your relative proximity to Blue Bloods. Like, being able, like at Iowa State, it's being able to have lots of autonomy. Matt Campbell has a lot of autonomy to do what he wants to do. Jamie Pollard, Matt Campbell asks for something, Jamie Pollard says, "We'll make it happen," and that's really valuable to have if you're going to be a head coach, and to have a fan base and to have a fan base that's supportive of you, and to have an athletic director that's going to be patient and understand that things are going to go wrong, and that's just part of the deal or whatever. But we get through it and we get better down the road, type of thing or whatever. So having patience, having support, having some level of autonomy, not having to answer to boosters and shit like that. But that's a lot more and it's extremely valuable, and and I think coaches are starting to realize that just taking the bigger paycheck by moving from Colorado to Michigan State doesn't really mean all that much.
Well, and it's funny too, because you look at a school like Kansas. I think Kansas is a little bit unique, right? In that the most important program, the one that people are going to worry the most about, is always going to be basketball. You can be super successful at football, and a lot of people will love you, but like if the basketball program imploded, like the entire school would be going up in arms. Like it would be a big deal. Right. We've dealt with the football team being bad, like being atrocious for a really long time. And while you absolutely love to have a good football program, basketball is what runs the university. And they've talked about, and Leipold actually talked about it in his press conference yesterday, that football is important to set up the year that you're trying to have as an entire athletic program. We know that basketball has been required to run the bus for so long here, but the goal is not for football, for this to become a football school. The goal is for the football team to be good enough to set the entire program, the entire athletic department up for a lot of success. And I think that they have the opportunity to do that. Like there's never going to be the expectations. I have a hard time imagining that Kansas fans are ever going to get to a point where they could see an 8-win season as a disappointment. Like even if they, get to the point where they're competing for the Big 12 title, year in and year out, and they're, finishing like top 4 or something like that. Like if they got to that point, and you took a dip and only won 8 games in a season, like I think Kansas fans would still be ecstatic, because that meant that you have a good football team, one that is fun to enjoy. It tided you over till basketball, and now basketball's in full swing, and you can still pay attention to a decent football team and really focus in on what you think is going to be another potential national championship run for the Jayhawks in basketball, because us Kansas fans always think that every year we have an opportunity to win the championship. So, but like
I will tell you though that to have some caution when you say that, though, that because I would have never pegged Iowa State fans for having high expectations, like consistently, but last year they were like, even if they'd beaten Iowa last year to go 8-4, that probably would have still felt like if everything else was the same, but they beat Iowa instead. I mean, Aiden, I don't know what you think, but I think I still would have been a little dissatisfied with the season. If conference went exactly as it did, and we just beat Iowa instead of losing to Iowa to finish 8-4. I don't know.
I mean, Kansas fans at this point, though, like we would we're having a hard time imagining, right, where a bowl game is something that you're
That's
disappointed
fair.
in. So
That's fair. I
Like,
was saying that
I
shows
think
up-
it'll
that-
take a good 15 years of Kansas, going to bowl games every single year for them
I'm
to be
telling you,
upset
man, we
about
would
it.
have said 5 years ago we would have said the same damn thing. But here we are, and we're bitching about a team that's probably going to go 7-5 or whatever, and it's like, and like we were talking about this year. I think this year had better expectations, like 6-6. Is 6-6 is okay depending on what happens, type of thing, or whatever. But like last year, if you talk to anybody that said 7-5 was definitely going to be a disappointment, 8-4 was like, it kind of depends on what have to happen, but you don't love 8-4 or whatever. 9-3 was like, I'm going to be really happy if we go 9-3 or better, something like that. Now they went 7-5, so it was definitely a disappointment. But if you had told Iowa State fans that if you'd said at the end of the 2016 season and that at the end of the 2021 season we would be kind of pissed off that we finished 7-5.
Yeah, it's
not
funny.
a one would have believed you. Not a one.
Well, it is kind of funny though, because I do think that in that particular department, Kansas fans have a little bit of advantage. One, because their football team has been atrocious multiple times and had tiny spurts of being good. But you also have to think about
there.
Right. No, but you also have to think about the fact that most Kansas fans are also Kansas City Royals fans. So they had 2 good years
Twins,
where they
White Sox.
well, no, but like,
Cubs.
2 really good years where it looked like the program was set up to be really good for a while, and then it all crashed down because they literally used all their chips to win a World Series in 2015. Same thing with the Chiefs.
Cubs.
The fact the only reason the Chiefs are any good, honestly, was because they were able to get Patrick Mahomes to set that up, and then able to build around him, and he was smart enough to realize what they needed to do. And obviously getting guys like Travis Kelce helped and all of that sort of stuff. But Kansas City Chiefs were awful for a really long time. Like, I lived through
They
the
were bad for a
2000s
while.
where like all of my teams were as bad as they could possibly be, except for Kansas basketball. So like Kansas fans are used to really bad teams that have small spurts of being good and then go back to being atrocious again. So like, I think a Kansas team that is going to a bowl game every other year, like that's where Kansas wants to get. If Leipold can get them to that, then I think everybody is happy at this point. Now, maybe they get to the point where they want it to go a little bit higher, but the way that things have gone so far for Leipold at this point, I have no reason to think that the program won't continue to improve as long as he's here. The real question is, does he see himself here long term for 10 years or so, or is this an opportunity for him to put this program on the right trajectory and then move on to the next challenge?
I think what happens with the expectations thing is that, at least what happened with Iowa State was that they improved really quickly, went from 3 wins to 7 plus a bowl game, or 8-5, and then they're like, well, that's interesting, and then they went 8-4 in the regular season, in 2018, and all of a sudden that's another pretty marked improvement there, and then all of a sudden the outside starts coming in and saying, okay, we got improvement from 7, from 3 to 7 and 7 to 8. It's only got to go up. That's what it is. That's what the outside will tell you. And that's what the outside told Iowa State, is that every podcast, every show, everyone said like, well, what can Iowa State do in 2019 or whatever? They've got, they're trending up. They got to get better, but don't realize going from 3 to 7 wins is a lot easier than going from 7 to 9. Because the margin of error from 7 to 9 is so much smaller. Like one little tiny dumb luck turnover or something like that can completely ruin that. Can take away a game.
Well, the other problem too is that football is one of those, I think, more unique sports in that it is almost impossible for a single player to make the difference.
Exactly, and that's exactly right. But when you get to the higher levels and when you're trying to turn 7 wins into 9 wins and stuff like that, just the tiniest little things matter, and that's where it gets a lot harder, and a lot of people don't realize that. So then, in 2019, Iowa State goes 7-5, and almost goes 6-6 if not for a close game. Because Kansas gave them a close game, and so if not for a couple plays there towards the end, almost went 6-6 in 2019, and that was a huge disappointment at the time because I think Iowa State fans kind of let the outside get to their heads a little bit and say, we've got this far. We need to keep going forward all the time, whatever, and that's just what it is. And we kind of got to this point where you listen to the outside enough, and then you eventually start believing them, and you start adopting their philosophies a little bit, and not understanding that once you get towards the top, it's a lot slower progress, and bumps in the road happen and things like that. And to a certain extent, I think Iowa State fans started to believe that, and not all of them. Some did though, or ever saying like last year, anything below 9 wins is a disappointment. It's like, hold on, 9 wins, 1 is a tie for the regular season record for Iowa State, or whatever. Like we'd have to you can't just set the record as the minimum, whatever. But 2, it's really hard to win 9 games.
Yeah,
it's it's extremely hard. It's hard for Alabama to win 9 games or whatever. They do it because they're really good and they're really well coached. That's just what it is. But it's still really hard to win 9 games. And there's times where we let that stuff kind of warp our perception of what's going on and what expectations should be, what they should look like, and understanding that adversity happens. It does. Adversity happens, and understanding that this is just part of the game. Like sometimes you'll have a season that didn't quite meet expectations. Sometimes it'll go way above expectations. 2020 and 2021 are great examples of this. Coming out in that 2019, we're like, well, I don't know, we'll see what happens. 2020, they go to the Fiesta Bowl and kick the shit out of Oregon. Fantastic. 2021, they come back, we're like, wow, they're going to be great, and then they were just kind of whatever. They won 7-5 or whatever, and it's just kind of part of the thing. But we let a lot of people tell us what our expectations should be and what we should expect out of the program. I think a lot of Iowa State fans let other people tell us how to think about our program.
Well, and I think the other thing too, when you think about it, the better your team gets, the more bandwagon fans jump on.
Right.
And of course, the bandwagon fans are the ones
also,
they expect it to be good.
They expect it to go they expect it to do something else.
They jump on because they see an upward trajectory and are only willing to hold on as long as it continues going that way. Whereas, us diehards that have been here and stayed fans throughout the awful, winless years are used to the idea that, it's not always going to get better. Sometimes it'll be worse before it gets better again. So, and I do think in Kansas' case, it helps that, they had the absolutely magical 2008 year where they went to the Orange Bowl, or I guess 2007 season where they went to the Orange Bowl. And then it all fell apart really quickly. Like they went to a bowl game the next year, and then after that, they won their first 5 or 5-0, and then lost the last 7 games to
that
not
2018
make a bowl game.
was so wild too, because because the starting corners were Aqib Talib, and then there was one other one that was really good. What was his name?
Chris Harris.
Chris Harris, yes, that's the other one. It was Chris Harris and Aqib Talib, and then they had they had a bunch of really good players on that team.
Oh yeah, they had a ton of really good players that honestly, a lot of them you probably still don't actually know their names just because that they didn't do much afterwards. But yeah, cornerbacks were like the one area where they just had absolutely phenomenal guys that ended up going to the NFL and playing. And that's, for a long time, that's all people knew about Kansas, right? Was that they had those people for, a really long time, like forever ago. And then now they haven't really been able to do much since, which, so I the hope is that people are kind of realistic about what's happening here. And that as we get better and we see them continue, that, the expectations don't jump up too much. And I think that's what a lot of Kansas fans are fighting. Like all the podcasts I listen to, all the people that I talk to, it's really hard to not adjust your expectations, right? Like there are a lot of people that are, they basically said, hey, if we lost the rest of the games, the rest of the way, we've already exceeded what my expectations were. Because there was a ton of people that thought they were going to win 3 games this year. I came into the year thinking that there was a good shot for them to go ahead and go to a bowl game. And I'm refusing right now to adjust my expectations upward. Like I think that they're going to make the bowl game still, but I am not ready to say, hey, maybe they can compete for the Big 12. Maybe they can, get 9 wins or something. Sure, that's possible, but it's going to require them to do things and show me things in the next couple of weeks to get to that point. It's like once they hit bowl eligibility, then I'll think about how much higher it can get.
Everything else from there on is cherry on top. That's just
right.
That's just extra shit. That's the best advice I can give Kansas fans as you guys begin your ascent as the same way Iowa State did is to not let the outside world tell you what your expectations for your program should be. Because there's nobody that knows Kansas football better than Kansas fans. There's nobody that knows Iowa State football better than Iowa State fans.
Yep.
And if you let the outside world tell you what to expect out of your football program instead of gauging what you already know and what should happen, or what you think a fair expectation is of the football program that you've watched your entire life,
Yeah.
Trust your own things. Don't let, because I know like after like the 2018 season when everyone thought Iowa State was going to take a huge jump forward in 2019, and I think a lot of us let the world tell us, like, you know what, Iowa State is going to take a huge jump forward, all this, and they didn't. I mean, part of it's bad luck and whatever else, but
Yeah,
I think that's what's created a dilemma for Cyclone fans a little bit, is to know is now we've gotten into this habit now of because Iowa State is at a point now where they can beat anybody on the schedule. There's enough talent there that they can beat anybody on the schedule. But the difference between can beat anybody to we should beat everybody that we should beat, two totally different things. But it's such a fine line, and it's the difference between it's the difference between having an enjoyable season that you can watch and have fun with and watch the growth of a team, whatever, and being miserable the whole time because they're not winning every single game by 30.
Yeah, no, it's funny because I have seen now there's so many people that their default now is, oh, well, their offense is good, but their defense is horrible. They're going to regress because of the defense. It's like, that very well may happen. Like, yeah, the defense may end up not being as we think it is or as opportunistic as we think it can be, just because, hey, they're going to start playing a lot better offenses as we get into conference play. But the one thing that I do know is that I'm going to enjoy watching this offense every single week and seeing what they can do and hoping that they can keep it competitive enough that I can be invested in the end of a game. That's all I'm asking for. And I think that there's a lot of Kansas fans who are holding that perspective. And hopefully it stays that way throughout the rest of the season, because I would really hate for people to get super upset with this team if they somehow don't make a bowl game, and being super upset because, hey, guess what? The defense couldn't, stop other teams from scoring and the offense couldn't score every single drive. It would be a real shame if they let that change the way that they feel about this team and the way that this team has really made those improvements already.
Right.
All right. We haven't really talked about the game specifically this weekend.
I was wondering,
prediction wise. Levi, go ahead.
I'm gonna say 31-27 Iowa State, but I don't feel confident about it at all.
Andy, what do you got? So I kind of struggle with this because I do think that Kansas is going to score. And I'm the big question for me is, how much is Iowa State going to be able to score? I don't see a scenario where Kansas scores less than 35. I think that Daniels himself is going to run a couple in. You're going to get some pretty good passes. They will find ways to get some of those big chunk plays to score. The question is going to be, is Iowa State going to be able to do enough, or is the defense going to be able to get enough stop, make it so that 35 is enough? Because honestly, the Duke game, well, I mean, I guess technically the Tennessee Tech game, but that one I'm not even counting because of the huge talent disparity there. But the Duke game is the only game that would have been enough for them to actually win it. So I think just looking at what Hunter Dekkers has done and the way, I think it really comes down to Tom Manning. If Tom Manning can get out of the way of the Iowa State offense enough that they can go ahead and do the things that they need to be able to do, then I think this is a really tight game, and it really just comes down to who makes the last play at the end. But the way that Iowa State's offense has been playing, it is hard for me to imagine that they're going to be able to be mistake-free and that they're going to be able to avoid the kind of turnovers that Kansas has been able to find. I mean, they have averaged 2 turnovers a game of the opponent. I could easily see them getting 2 interceptions on Hunter Dekkers with the way that he's playing right now. Or I should say the way that the offense is clicking right now. And so if that happens, I do think that Kansas wins this one, and they could potentially even win it by double digits. But ultimately, I think it's probably going to come down to some late touchdown drives. Even if Kansas gets up, which they've done multiple times, getting up big, the defense for whatever reason goes prevent, and then the offense goes super conservative, and teams have been able to come back with Jayhawks because they just, for whatever reason, stop doing what has made them so successful. So ultimately,
classic end of the half Iowa State right there.
Yeah, except for Kansas, it's end of the game. It's not end of the half. So
that's an unfortunate time to do that.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a little worrisome. I ultimately, though, think that Kansas is going to get enough of a boost from having another sellout crowd.
Jackson over here is absolutely distraught.
I didn't say it would happen. I said it could happen if Iowa State doesn't get their heads out of their butts.
This guy, he is losing his goddamn mind over here.
But no, ultimately, I think it comes down to, you know what? Kansas defense is not as bad as you think it is. You have to think as well about the number of times where Kansas just got punched in the mouth at the very beginning, like a ton of yards and a ton of that bad, ratings came from going down 14-0 in 2 consecutive games against Houston and then against West Virginia. But the offense in both of those responded really quickly and did a lot of things that I don't think anybody was ready for. And I think it really just comes down to how well Kansas and Kotelnicki is able to adjust to what Iowa State throws at them defensively. So I do think that Kansas will go ahead and pull this one off just because, the confidence I have in that offense. I would not be shocked if Iowa State, wins, or if they win by 10 points even, just because the Kansas defense isn't able to do enough. I think it really comes down to, like, Levi and I talked about this over on my podcast. If Iowa State plays at the top of their game, then I think Iowa State is good enough to win this one by 14 points. I just don't have the confidence looking at these two teams to think that Iowa State's going to play at their best. And I do think that Kansas is going to play pretty close to their best. And so I see Kansas winning this one. It's probably going to be something like 38-35. Like, I think that Iowa State starts to score. They start to get stuff together. Their offense starts to click. But my worry for Iowa State fans is that it's just not going to be enough, early enough in the game for them to be able to come all the way back at the end.
I think that's fair.
One thing that I would like to point out that we just need to sit right here and appreciate. Last time that Iowa State and Kansas was a one-possession game, both teams coming in had just one win. Look at us.
Look at us.
Who would have thought?
I
Both
was
of
still
us.
in college when the 2013 Ice Bowl happened, and I can't even believe that we're here right now.
What a time to be alive for both fan bases. Anyway, my prediction, I think Andy made a lot of good points. There's a lot of things in this game that could go a lot of different directions. And if Iowa State can get out of their own way, I think it'll lean towards Iowa State, but things could easily go towards Kansas. That being said, I think Iowa State isn't going to score more than 31 points. Whether they can hold Kansas to 30 or fewer, I don't know. So I guess I'll take 31-28. It's my lock it in.
That's kind of where I'm at right with it. Is that the defense? We know Iowa State's defense is at least very solid, if not pretty damn good. So that's why I don't see Kansas putting up 40 on. I don't think that's.
But honestly, I am really excited to see Kansas' offense against our defense, regardless of the outcome.
It'll be a good test. It'll be a good litmus test to see if Kansas is any good, and it might tell us if Iowa State's any good on that side of the
honestly,
ball.
I think this is the first game for both teams where you're going to know something definitive about your team coming out of this game.
Because
unless
up
something
to this point,
stupid like
Kansas's offense has looked really good against defenses, like a couple okay defenses and a couple real dog shit defenses. And Iowa State's defenses looked really good against a couple of offenses and a couple dog shit offenses or whatever. So that's the hard part, is that there's not a super strong sample size. There's an okay sample size, but it's not super strong or anything for either of their best units. So I'll be curious to see if, because Kansas is a run heavy team. I think it's like 60% run or something like that right now is the current play calling disparity. Not that Kansas can't pass, but right now they are a run heavy team, and Iowa State's defense is very good against the run. Now, are they good against Kansas's run? I don't know.
Right.
They're good against Baylor and Iowa's run, but I don't know if they're good against Kansas's run. So
I think Kansas' run is different enough from pretty much everyone else that I don't know how much you can directly translate. I think you can translate some of it. The question is going to be, is it similar enough that what Iowa State is good at in stopping
Yeah,
the run.
and we're gonna find that out. I hope we find out that Tom Manning watched fucking film last week and was like, you know what, maybe we should throw the ball more than fucking 4 yards downfield, or whatever. And I could stop being an idiot, but I
All
don't
right,
know.
before
maybe
you go
not.
off another tangent, I think time to wrap this thing up.
Yeah, I'm not going any
We don't
further
have another
than
30
that, but,
minutes.
like,
Yeah.
I'm not going any further than that, but holy Christ.
So can we all just agree that we have no idea what's going to happen this
No,
weekend?
not a fucking clue. No idea.
If anybody tells you that they know what's going to happen,
They're selling you something, man.
Yeah.
There's no way. I have no damn clue about this game.
I have a really good idea of general things, right? Of like how I think the game's going to go. I think Kansas is going to score quite a bit. Iowa State's going to make some big plays defensively, but Kansas is going to make a few big plays defensively, and the real unknown is how well Iowa State's offense is going to play. Like that's it. The problem is there's so many degrees of possibilities for those different things to come together that, you know, I have no idea how the game is actually going to go.
Right.
So, yeah, I'm just, you know what? I mean, the main reason, it's kind of funny because I think the main reason that I want Kansas to win this week, besides the fact to be 5-0, is because I'm also really hoping that TCU pulls off the upset and beats Oklahoma, and then we get game day next week, you know, with 2 undefeated teams. So I don't want to have to wait until Kansas is 7-1 and Oklahoma State is 8-0 to, you know, have game day come to Lawrence. So
One thing we can all agree on, though, is that Kansas State can go to hell.
Yeah.
yeah,
Stupid purple kitties.
Fucking purple kitties.
All right. We good to go? That's a good note to end on.
that's a good place to end. Yes,
Yeah.
we can all agree on that.
Yeah. All right, Andy, thank you for joining us.
Yeah.
I guess we'll see you on the other side. Godspeed, good buddy. All right. For Andy,
Sounds like you're sending
Levi.
them on a space shuttle to a
Yeah.
asteroid to blow it up with a nuke.
No, you're like sending me through the wormhole.
Yeah. I was referencing Armageddon, Andy. Watch movies. Anyways, continue.
I haven't seen it either. Don't feel bad.
You haven't seen Armageddon?
Nope. All right, that's our show. For Andy
What's
Mitz,
wrong
Levi
with you?
Stevenson, Wayne Wyatt,
Kidding me?
go Cyclones.